Guys, thank you very much. This is sort of a change in schedule only because we ran late earlier, but we're going to make up the time. We're going to get you guys moving. So Richard and I have a great opportunity here to actually sit down with the mover and shaker, our one of the newest neighbors in Harlem. This young lady has already, I'm going to ask you guys take your conversation somewhere else. So this young lady who's been on the grind, if you will, but more importantly, what I like to say about Jessica is she actually moved her company from downtown to Harlem. That's a big deal. She has already put over $200,000 into our community. Hello? Can anybody hear me? This is a business, a company that looks to be very much a part of the community, hiring local people, using vendors that are local. She's a conscious CEO, a conscious founder, someone who is brilliant enough to come up with a great concept for her company, but she's also very much part of the community. So I'm very honored to have her here, and if I could have her at every single thing I do, I would, but she's a world traveler. She's all over the world. She's taken her skills, she's taken her company, her brand, her solutions to the most remote places in the world. And we're going to sit down with her for just a few minutes to check in with her, see where she's at, how we can be of help to her, and really share a little bit about what she's doing. So Richard, Louie, and I are going to sit with Jessica and just do a quick talk. And if you guys have a couple questions, we'll take a few. We got to get her out of here. She's a world traveler, like I said, and all over the place. But I'm honored. And her sister's here too, which makes it family. So we're all here, and that's Tiana. So we are excited about having Jessica come up. Just come take a seat and let's do this tech talk. Jessica Matthews, people.
Clayton, I have a seat right over here for you. Yep, with a microphone.
So we're going to try not to ask like those typical questions. Let's try to ask.
Try to stump me.
Well, we'll let you shine. So the first question I think has been on my mind is, in a lot of ways, the way you launched your company and the way you launched your initiative, so to speak, was outside of the United States. And our first question is really, how is it different, if you will, from launching a company internationally the way you did, and what are the challenges that you're seeing happening, putting this company here in the United States, but specifically in Harlem, and what are some of the challenges that come with that?
Sure. So first, hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. I'm a dual citizen of Nigeria and the United States. So I feel like I'm blessed that I actually have been comfortable to have my foot in the African economy and the African experience as much as I've had my foot in the experience of being African American. And Harlem to me is, all about diversity, but also very much about specifically the burgeoning artistic culture and expression, of being African American. And so it makes sense and very much fits to me. In terms of launching our business overseas, so for those of you who don't know, I run an energy company. We literally, I saw a company look up like, energy company? What the hell is she doing? What? Energy? I run an energy company here in Harlem. We make energy generating products. Specifically though, we actually have a platform that can basically harness power from 3 different types of motion: rotational, linear compression, like stepping down on anything or sitting on furniture, and sliding, like clothing and whatnot. And this technology can be integrated into almost anything that moves. So literally imagine a world where everything around you, from the way you're sitting in the floor, the way you're moving in your car, the way you're moving in your clothes, all of that motion can be harnessed to power everything from the lights to the Wi-Fi, to the data sensors, IoT. And so the way we started, though, was actually making energy-generating sports products like soccer balls and jump ropes, specifically for the developing world, specifically for communities that have kids who love to play, but also have kids who live in homes where once the sun goes down, that's the end of their day. They don't have a reliable grid. They don't have an alternative that doesn't cause lung cancer, that doesn't exacerbate an already bad global warming system or situation. And so for us to launch a business there, the first thing was really just addressing an issue that was facing people in my family. So I think one of the first things that helps whenever you're launching a business is having a personal narrative or a personal story that helps you push through the hard times and really help you just have that grit to get through. But the key thing was really understanding the market and who would be interested in playing. So we worked with governmental partners. That's actually a huge thing when you want to do anything. On the African continent, often in developing markets, you're not going to get investors first. You have to prove your case and prove your market. So we had to build our technology, build prototypes of our technology, and get people who would be the buyers of our technology to believe in what we were doing. And once they believed in what we would be doing, they started to create a network of opportunities for us to distribute our products. Now, if you bring it back to the work that we're doing here in the United States, to be honest, I almost think it's similar, not because of the distribution mechanism or the lack of financing in general, but because as a woman of color and how difficult, I did raise around, and I'll speak to that later, but because of how difficult it is for women of color to raise money, you have to think about how to have a dynamic business model. You have to think about who is going to get a benefit from this in the private sector and how can they fund your business. And so we did the same thing working with marketing agencies, actually, who wanted to fund our work and get a collateral for their brand as part of what we're pushing and doing. And I think that in many ways, that's actually what made it all one very similar experience for me.
12, is it 12 patents we got?
15.
15 patents.
It's been a day. Yeah. I was interested in what you just said, being a woman of color and how you were able to raise money. You mentioned that was difficult. What was your best, as the esteemed Clayton likes to ask, what's the best practice that you could teach others who are women of color to break through and raise money?
So what are the stats, right? Only 13 black women, as far as we know, according to Project Diane, have ever raised more than $1 million. The average amount that a black woman will raise in her lifetime is $34,000. We just closed a round for $7 million. So, thank you. But yeah. So, to me, the best practice is almost, the social scientist in me is wary to say what's the best practice because I'm an outlier right now. Like, we haven't changed the stand. We haven't changed the pattern yet. We just suggested that something could be different, right? And the first thing I think that I did in my experience was, as I said, try to find dynamic business models to allow me to have a bit more certainty in what I was trying to build before I went to go and look for investors. Because unfortunately, I felt the need that I would need to have more to show. I can't just say, I got an idea and I could get funded. But a lot of people can, but that wasn't my experience. I think that it's a dynamic issue. We need to empower those in our community that are lawyers, that are financiers, that that have the funds to invest. Those, when I say in our community, I say anyone that doesn't meet the standards, so or the standard pattern of Silicon Valley. So women, people of color, members of the LGBT, whatever is the other, we need them to be financiers because people invest in people. And people invest in what they see as similar between themselves and the person that they're giving money to. So what helped me was actually first looking at who was not only in the energy space, but who happened to have ties to Africa. One, for strategic reasons, because we want to own the African energy market. Why not, right? But also because at least then I'm just a woman. Like, I'm not also, it's like, oh yeah, we're both African. Like, at least the only hurdle is like, I'm just a woman. And then I went to a lot of female venture, funds, like BBG Ventures. And it's like, okay, at least then I'm just black. Like, it's like trying to cut down on the differences so it's an easier conversation. You know what I mean? And so, I think that it's one of those things where actually, though, what was interesting is that I had to get into conversations where I had to convince people that they should be investors so that they would then invest in me. Because half the round was through, yes, venture, but the other half was through high net worth angels who had never really thought about being angels to anything where you would get your return upon exit versus like dividends. I remember actually specifically saying, like, this isn't a restaurant. Like, no, like I'm not giving, no. They're like, when do we get paid back? I'm like, I don't know. You may not. Like, do you understand what you have to make sure, right? But I think that really helped. Another thing I think is really important is to not see your differences though, like from the business model perspective as an obstacle, rather see it as a competitive advantage. So while I know that from a psychological perspective, people are prone to want to invest in what they find familiar in terms of the individual, that aside, in terms of the opportunities of the business and what we're building, I was very excited that my perspective as a dual citizen of Nigeria and the US, as someone who was building from an experience that many people in Silicon Valley wouldn't have, I thought that was actually something that we should position as a competitive advantage. And this wasn't something that I invented. It was actually talking to a venture capitalist and me saying to them, I'm afraid to raise money because I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. I'm nothing like him. Yes, we went to the same school, but I doubt he was on the STEP team. How am I going to engage in this world and go through the ups and downs in business with people who don't get me? And he was like, yes, it's true that, these investors might be different from you. But what they also see, though, is that Mark Zuckerberg could have never created the socket ball. Where would he have? He is going to pull from his own experiences and his own observations to create what he thinks he needs, right? He couldn't get a date, blah, 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 Facebook. That's his thing. My thing, my family needs energy, la-da-da, socket. Like, there you go. Like, you pull from what you can pull from. And that means that I understand the market and I understand the intangible intricacies of what it will take to really think about the vision of this product and this company in a way that is a benefit, it's a competitive advantage. And I think if you present that when you're to your investors, they get excited about that, because the reality of the situation is everyone knows if you're looking for the next innovative thing, you can't look where everyone's looking. Yeah.
Let me jump in because we only have a few more minutes with Jessica. We can listen to her for the rest of the night. So you have another movement. In addition to these great things you're doing with the energy, you have a movement for education and working with young people. Talk a little bit about that so that everyone gets an idea.
Sure. So, what was really interesting is, so we started as a company that designed energy-generating soccer balls and jump ropes. And the goal behind that wasn't to solve the energy problem, but was to kind of create a spark in people's minds about what was possible when you looked at the world like it was your playground, when you were willing to engage with in the world in that hopeful and passionate way. And then in doing that, we realized that people, once they were inspired, they needed something more. They needed something to be trained in. So we developed this really great curriculum called Think Out of Bounds that actually teaches kids from low-income communities around the world and locally how to invent with limited resources. The concept, again, being that, impact can't just be to inspire, then you have to teach, and then you have to catalyze, right? So, and ideally scale. So after years of thinking about what could be most impactful, and also my own story of being an inventor and what that did for me, there's the confidence of saying I'm an inventor, of having a patent, which, by the way, only 13% of patent holders are women, which is a problem because my favorite inventor is my mom, and I know she doesn't have any patents, but she should. It changes the way you engage with the world. It changes the way you think about the world. And so the idea was, how do we do that? Not just because I believe that the problems of this world are too complex for only one company or group of people to solve, and we need to inspire and motivate as many people as possible to be part of this movement to create the future they want, but also because I believe that the best talent is going to be found in the places where no one's looking, and the places where people who haven't had a chance to be a part of the table or be part of the conversation, they probably have some ideas. Thank you. So we are now launching a program called Uplift 1 Million. And the idea is pretty simple. You know, while we expand our business and push out our core technology, the micro generator technology I was talking about earlier, we are not going to forget where we came from or where we're going. And so the ideas with Uplift 1 Million is to spend the next 3 to 5 years pushing 1 million kids around the world and locally. We want to actually, I believe, push, I think, 10,000. Naomi, how many? Naomi, how many kids? 10,000, thank you. 10,000, she knows. 10,000 Harlem students specifically even through this program. And the goal is to turn them into inventors. And it's not just because of what it will do to, again, diversify the table. It's also, to me, good business. Because now we're going at and finding the talent that I'm going to want to hire around the world in Harlem. And we're going to also see the products and the inventions and help bring those forward as a hardware tech company. And I think that's important to note, because I don't believe that really doing good, if you're really doing it right, it should also be good business. It should also be good business. And so I'm very proud of what we're doing.
I got a amongst greatness. I got so it's now I think you have 32 patents. It's already been 30 minutes. What do you do? What's the exercise that you do to keep your brain so creative and innovative as you've had all these patents? How do you keep the brain muscle smart so that you're in that space?
That's a really good question. I'm a firm believer that discomfort breeds innovation. So in a weird way, I try to make sure that I try to work on that balance of being comfortable enough to think freely without being so comfortable that I've forgotten what it means to struggle. Because I truly believe, like, innovation lives between a rock and a hard place. And if you've addressed all of your problems, you have no reason to keep figuring out a way to break through. Even the word disruption, I've said this before, like, it's not designed to be a clean word. Like, it's a messy word, like, which means that you are in a situation where you feel like you need to erupt, right? Like, and for that to happen, I think your setting matters. One thing, you know, beyond just kind of general stimuli, I think it's the people you have around you. We have a very diverse team. More than half our team is female. I believe at least 40% of our team would be considered underrepresented in tech. And they're coming from so many different countries and experiences and religions, and they're bringing their experiences, and we're forced to engage. In addition, quite frankly, I think the move to Harlem. We were downtown, you know, seeing two types of people live their life in one type of way. It was a matter of time that we would start creating very groupthink things. Whereas uptown in Harlem, you'll see 7 types of people living their lives in 14 different ways. You'll see your rabbi on 96th, you see your barber on 125th, but just by the time you're done talking to everyone between those streets, you've engaged with the world. And if you're an empathetic person, I think then you're going to immediately start thinking about how to solve their problems as well.
Okay, we're going to. What? By the way, are any of the Uncharted Play here folks? Stand up if you're here and you work with this company.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that! Look at that right here already. So we're gonna let Jessica move on and do her thing. But if you want to like harass some people, you just saw them wave their hands.
I don't have time. Do I have time for one?
Okay, one more question. We'll do one more question.
He's my timer guy. Do I have time? Okay.
Okay. Well then, why don't you spend the time the way you want to spend it? What would you like to share with this audience? Unless Richard Louis, do you want to give her your data point question?
What makes you uncomfortable?
I mean, so many things. I mean, let's not forget. Like, I still think I'm still. When we think about privilege or lack of access to things, like I think I'm a firm believer that it's important to recognize privilege in every scenario. And I was blessed to come from a great family and go to really great schools. But the largest groups I think of privilege, that still can lead to discomfort if you're not part of that conversation. I'm not a man. So that in engaging and trying to do what I do, running an energy company, there can be some discomfort there in terms of even the strategies. Like guys I know, entrepreneur guys that are all in the same circle, they'll say, this is how you raise money. You got to become best friends with the guys, go out drinking with them. I'm like, not as a woman. Do you know what happens when women do that? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a thing.
Gender privilege.
They don't need, so there's gender. And then also, I mean, as a woman of color, as a person of color, there's obviously discomfort. I mean, my brother can't wear a hoodie outside. He's my own little brother. I mean, that's uncomfortable, right? Like there's a lot happening in the news that can make you feel angry. I mean, there's a constant paranoia, I think, of, and maybe really, who knows if it's paranoia, of feeling like you have to do twice as much to go half as far. Literally, we watch Scandal, we're told that, and so we're thinking that that's what everyone is expecting of us. But I think, ultimately, what makes me uncomfortable is anything that elicits an emotional response before it elicits a logical response, because I have to then work to keep that in. But that practice of holding that in, I think just makes me feel more alive. It makes me feel more human. And for me, that's what I can then pull innovation out of.
Well, drop the mic on that one. I mean, wow. So I want to, on behalf of Richard and myself, we want to thank you for spending a few minutes with us. We know you have a busy schedule. Give her one more hand, if you will. We're going to let Jessica go.